Anything extraordinary because you were never meant for ordinary. What does that mean? Anything extraordinary because you were never meant for ordinary. Let that roll off your tongue. I came up with that name as I was thinking about who we are as people and who I am as a person. And I'm going to tell you a bit about me, and I'm also going to relate it to you so that you could see yourself in this story and we can go on this journey together because it's no fun having somebody just talk at you. It's so much more fun when you're co-creating together. My name's Marilyn Alauria. I'm a psychic medium teacher and coach, but I didn't start out that way. I started out as a very sensitive child in Brooklyn, raised in a very difficult, traumatic household, but also a good household to some degree. My mother was very good, but I was extremely sensitive and empathic without knowing what that meant. So to them, I was the drama queen. I was Sandra Bernhardt, my mother would always say, who was an actress who was always very dramatic. And to me, I was just super sensitive and I felt everything. But I didn't know that, so I thought maybe I was dramatic. And what happens with empathic children or sensitive children, for those of us who are like that, is we go around our lives. We have this incredibly bright light because we're here to do these amazing things. We have these incredible dreams. We have these incredible sensitivities. We're tapped in a way that many people may not be tapped into, or maybe a lot of people are. I don't know. But I know myself and I know the people that I've worked with because I've worked with thousands of people over the years, teaching them how to develop their intuitive skills, their psychic skills, develop their gifts, and become who they're meant to be in this world, which is extraordinary. So as kids, we were very sensitive to everything. We always wanted to take care of people, make people happy, make people feel good, and our light was bright. For me, I was very outgoing. I was very assertive. They called me aggressive, but I changed the word to assertive. I was just very like this. And I wouldn't say maybe I was loud. They probably would say I was loud. I would say loud, maybe loud. But I was that person. I started recognizing being in my light and being who I was, that it made other people uncomfortable, that it would make people around me feel jealous of me, or people around me feel unhappy because I was highlighted and they weren't, or I had the attention and they didn't, or I was doing something amazing and they weren't. Now, trust me, I was a troublemaker kid. I was in a Catholic school, cloister nuns, private school. I was the daughter of a New York City police officer in the school with every mafia princess you could think of. I was in a very strict Italian school. I was the odd man out. I was also a child of a divorced family in a time in the early 70s when people were not divorced. So even though I was that child, I still was very outgoing and I spoke my words and did that. And I could tell the people around me, it made them uncomfortable. And so what did I do? I started dimming my light. I started forgetting who I was. I started turning down the extraordinary. I started becoming something that I wasn't to make other people happy. And then as time went on, you know what happens when we do that? We drink, do drugs. I became a little bit of a barroom brawler. I did a lot of drinking, a lot of partying. I still went to school. I graduated, went to college. I had a career at MTV, NBC. There's my Emmy. There's my book that I wrote about guides. Like I've been successful, but I was also a jumbled up mess inside and I was unhappy. By the time I got to MTV, I had this incredible job at an incredible time when MTV was a place to where to be working. And I was miserable and I was crying every day. And I was just so unhappy. And I went to a therapist and I started learning who I really was. And I started turning the light on a tiny bit and finding out who I am outside those labels of other people or who I decided to be so that I would fit in. And through that process and through that work, I discovered my truth. And at that point, it was to be an actress. I wanted to be an actress. And I always wanted to be an actress when I was little, but I was told I couldn't be. The therapist at the time, to get me more confident, told me to take an improv class. So I started taking an improv class. I was in Manhattan at the time, and I really fell in love with it and I loved it. And I was like, and the acting coach, Sheila Gray, amazing woman, she was like, you can do this. You could make money doing this. And I wasn't even thinking of it at that time. I was working at MTV. I was like, my career was moving, moving, moving. Even though I was unhappy, I was like, I'm just doing this for fun. I was like, maybe I'll do commercials or something. And then it took me, and I was like, yeah, I want to do this. I was at Fox News actually at that point. Before Fox News was Fox News, we were the very beginning stage of it. Hated it. I was miserable. No political comments, please. That's not what this is about. It's just I just couldn't stand the job and the people, and it was just friggin' batshit stunk. And I decided I wanted to be an actress full time, and I decided that I wasn't ready to do it yet. I still needed to get some more training under my belt. So I went and got a job at NBC Olympics. And it was a year and a half, I think, my contract. And during that time, NBC was amazing. I was learning how to act. I was doing workshops. I was doing showcases, all different types of things. And then when I left NBC, I became an actress. So you could see how, and you could look at your own life where are the moments where you started turning on the light? Maybe you went to therapy. Maybe you went to a healer. Maybe you did some art classes. You started waking up the artist inside of you. Maybe you started doing music classes, started doing that, or photography. You started remembering your creative self, your soul, and you started turning the light on. There's so much to all of this that I want to share on this channel and in this way. And because I believe like my goal in life, and I'll continue on the story in a second, is to bring everybody back to remembering that everybody is extraordinary and you're not meant for ordinary. Because you may be sitting in a time in your life where you're like, this is not where I want to be. This is not where I'm meant to be. I work with a lot of people now. They're in their 50s. They had a wonderful career and they loved it. And then they didn't love it anymore because something happened in their life that put them on a healing journey. They read a book. They went to a healer. They went on a retreat. They did something and they started discovering the truth of who they were and who they are and who they want to be. And now they're ready to retire, but they're not ready to retire from life. They're ready to retire to something else, to write a book, to speak on stage, to help people where they were at. So these are the people I work with now to teach them how to trust that inner guidance, that voice inside, that to turn up that light and become who you're meant to be. And it's not too late. You're not too old. I'm turning 60 this year. And I said to a friend, I'm going to be 60 no matter what. Why not be 60 and friggin' fabulous? Why not have the best time in my life, the best years I can ever have? Why not? Doesn't matter if you're 30, 40, 50, 20. I don't care what age you are. The time is for you. I went on that journey and I got a lead in an off-Broadway play right away. So I was acting right away and I was in an equity play and that made me SAG and all these things. The thing that I started discovering was more and more of my own truth. I started getting down to the layers of the person I forgot who I was, to the extraordinary person. And the person who had to give her credit was me. It wasn't getting credit from, it was great to have certain mentors around me, like that acting teacher or my English lit professor, who I'm back in touch with, who woke up my writing skills. All these different people, those are wonderful people. And you need those types of people in your life, not the ones that try to squash you down. But the most important person I started listening to was me. I started listening to myself. And in that listening, my own gifts started opening up again. They were already opening up. I had them when I was little. They were opening up before I started acting because the signs were there and I was hearing things and working with tarot, working with different types of cards. I want to get to the point of this is about you, not about me. I want to illustrate a journey that you may relate to, or maybe you're entering that journey now and it inspires you to move forward into who you're meant to be right now. My gifts started opening up and I started seeing deceased people and I was going crazy and it was making me a little nuts. And I knew I wasn't crazy because I was already in therapy for so many years that I wasn't diagnosed with any type of disorder that would make you see things. I was diagnosed with PTSD, but not in the terms of she's seeing things or she's hearing things or any of that. So when I got to LA, I went to see a medium actually. And she walked in the room and she said, "You're a medium." And then the floodgates opened and it was just crazy. But it was also phenomenal because I came home to my soul. And I realized I had to learn to work with it because I was scared. I wasn't one of these mediums like, sure, come on in, come, let's have a conversation. Yeah, all right, there's a dead guy in my living room. Let's have a conversation. No, I was like, get the F out of my house. It was freaking me out. I was so scared I couldn't sleep. I had to sleep with lights on. I had to do all this kind of crazy stuff. And through that, I just learned more and more and more how to use my gifts. Now, there weren't a lot of teachers out there back then. The internet didn't exist back then. I've been doing this for over 20 years. So I luckily had these guides around me, which is why I wrote a book about guides who taught me things besides the little tidbits that I got from other teachers and books and stuff. There were definitely things out there that I learned from, but they taught me how to use my instrument, how to turn this on. You may see a certain way, you may hear a certain way, you may feel a certain way, you may have an intuition a certain way. That's your instrument. This is my instrument. How I see, hear, feel, sense, and know, how I know myself, how I am, this is my instrument. And it's up to me to get intimate with it. And that's what they taught me. So through that, when that opened up, I was still acting at the time, and these gifts were exploding. And I was doing readings because I was practicing and learning. And my readings were like off the charts good, like people's names, things that people didn't know. And I was talking about, and then they would find out they were true. Everybody's gifted. So I am not sitting here going, look at me. One of my biggest things that I teach people is that we are all gifted. And we all have our own unique path. We all have our own unique way of bringing those gifts out into the world that nobody else can do it the way that we do it, the way I do it, the way you do it. But here's the thing that happened. This is the anything extraordinary because I was never meant for ordinary. It started becoming so incredibly exciting, enticing, falling in love with myself in a way that I've never fell in love with myself, falling in love with my guidance, feeling like I said, I came home to my soul, feeling family around me, not ancestors, my guides, feeling like I belonged, feeling like I understood now all that crazy stuff that happened. It all started making sense. The dreams I had at 3 years old, and the feelings I had, and the things I saw, and the visions I had at 5 that came true, and things like that. It all started making sense. But then here was the caveat. What are you going to do with it? Because it became clear that I was giving readings for free and people started paying me, that I could do this for a living now. But I didn't want to be different. I didn't want to be that wackadoo that came up to you in the supermarket and said, hey, your uncle's standing behind you and he's saying blah, blah, blah. That was not going to be me. Look, that's okay for some people, but to me, that's a wackadoo. Don't come up to me. I was checking out mattresses in Macy's, laying on a mattress, and this woman came up to me. She's like, I'm going to read you today. I was like, get the F out of my face, lady. Don't like that stuff. So I was like, how do I stay normal? How do I play tennis? How do I go to the tennis court and play tennis and have conversations, go to dinner parties with friends that I've had for years, now that I've had this gift, now that these gifts are open? How do I do that? And so I had a conversation with God because God was and still is to me important. And I don't care what people believe in. I never have. I don't. And God and I had a very intimate conversation that I'm not going to express fully yet. And I recognized in that conversation and I said, okay, I'm going to do this work, but I'm going to be normal too. I just wanted to be able to be in normal circumstances, what we quote as normal, but still be my extraordinary self. And I did it. I did it. I would go on the tennis court and I could play tennis after holding space for a client who was deciding to leave the world at this time because of a assisted situation. I go to a dinner party where I don't know anybody. I'm new to the group and I can see things and I can hear things. I know how to turn it off. And I could be doing that right after I'm working on a murder case with a spirit and finding out where the murder weapon is. So I could be living these absolutely extraordinary moments and also living extraordinary moments at a dinner party. It was, I don't have to term either one as extraordinary, normal, but for the sake of this conversation, those were more than normal, acceptable things. And I wanted to be extraordinary and still have my life. I wanted to be who I truly am and still have my life. And I did it. And the thing that for me, and I think everybody has to decide what's for them, because I know people who, when they meet someone, they're like, I'm this, and I see your auras, and blah, 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 blah. And that's good for them. That wasn't for me. That wasn't for me. So I'm able to compartmentalize without compartmentalizing my soul or myself. I'm able to go into situations, and a lot of times on the tennis court, if people ask what I do, at that time I would say, I'm a life coach, because I didn't want to get into the conversation. What I really didn't want to get into, a lot of sometimes people back up from you. When I was getting my car fixed, and the guy who was fixing it was kind of flirting with me. And then when he asked what I did and I told him what I did, he backed up and he said, ooh, you would know if I was cheating on you. So people act a little bit different when they know what you do. Some people are skeptical and don't believe in it at all. They act different. So I read the situation and I choose who I tell it to and who I don't tell it to. A lot of times now people can Google and they can find out what I do. And they do somehow, they find out about it. Or I tell one person and it's like a telephone line and it goes to a bunch of people. But this is the other thing I've learned is what amazes me is how people they surprise me. The most skeptical person is talking to me about it and not in a way that's mean. They're interested. Or all the people that I worked at MTV, some of them were calling me for readings. They were all like, just believed me. They just accepted me for who I am. But the most important person that accepted me was me. And I accept the part of me that says, I'm not going to go into every circle talking about what I do. I don't want to. And I accept the part of me that does that and is okay with it. I also accept the part of me that does go into circles and talks about it. One thing about me is I can't stand really woo people that are not grounded. I bridge the practical with the spiritual. How do you bring the spiritual to the practical world and walk it? The people that can't walk in it, or they're riding unicorns, and I think unicorns are great. People think I don't like unicorns whenever I say I'm not a riding unicorn person. No, I love unicorns, but I'm not riding them all day long. I'm living my life. So I want to ask you, where's your extraordinary? What is your extraordinary that you've been hiding? What's the extraordinary you're ready to do? Because I know if you're watching this, you were never meant for ordinary. So if you like it, subscribe to the channel and share it with friends. Tell me what you think. Tell me what your extraordinary is, or where you struggle being extraordinary. Tell me where you're tired of being ordinary. Tell me where your extraordinary switched to ordinary, whatever it is. Tell me what it is, because I'm going to continue this conversation and I'm going to continue to share what I've learned about this so that we could all be extraordinary together. Thank you for listening.